listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast hosted by Matt Franks.
And Zach Bechtold. And today we have a very special guest to the podcast. We have Pastor Charles McKinzie, who is a licensed local pastor in the United Methodist Church and doing some really cool things. Has some fun stuff ahead of him in his ministry and life. And we wanted Charles, just to welcome you on and have you tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are and what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to be with you all. Again, I go by Pastor Charles very commonly, so that's a comfortable title for me. And I've been in ministry in the United Methodist Church, just preparing to complete my seventh year. I was kind of you might call me a late bloomer. That's okay. I'm a second career pastor. I had several careers before I finally said yes and stopped running away from my call. I think most of us have like a call story who are in ministry, and I won't bore you with the whole thing, but I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. Is that the first time I heard a call to ministry, I was 7 years old when a little old white-haired lady from my church growing up pointed her bony finger in my chest and said, "Young man, one of these days you're going to be a pastor."
Wow.
And I spent the next 30 years running away from that, despite other people in my life sort of pointing the proverbial bony finger at me and saying, "You're going to be a pastor." And so finally, at age 37, I ran out of excuses and said yes, and intended to be a limited part-time sort of working bivocationally pastor. Was going to just serve a small congregation in my region, and God had other plans. My full-time job was dissolved about a month and a half after I said yes to doing ministry quarter time. And so I went from, full-time employed to quarter-time employed to spending a lot of time in prayer and discernment with my family and saying, okay, apparently this is really where God wants me to be going. And so we just said, all right, we're gonna go in with both feet, and I'm gonna seek to be a pastor. And so here we are 7 years later. I'm in the process headed towards what we call full ordination in the United Methodist Connection. So I'm elder track in my continuation of studies. But this last year, another unexpected God thing happened. I was So a little bit of context for how this all came together before I introduced the project. One of my classmates from high school, she is a ordained deacon in the United Methodist Connection and serves a historic congregation in Lausanne, Switzerland. And about 2 years ago, she and I had reconnected after, I won't disclose how many years, not since high school. But she and I reconnected because she has a online meditation prayer group every week. It's an Ignatian style sort of end of day prayer, which for me happens at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Wednesday, where it's like 9 o'clock their time. But it's actually a group of Methodists, and often we have people represented from like 3 or 4 continents who are all together on this Zoom and in this prayer group. And so the more she and I reconnected, and I got to hear about her ministry, I was really excited. They're doing some really cool things with their historic building that are creative, that are kind of changing the way that they get to be sacred community. And so I had been sharing this with my family, and just so impressed and excited by the work that they are all about. That a year ago for Christmas, my wife said, "Hey, by the way, your Christmas gift this year is we're buying you a round trip ticket to go see Erica." To go visit for a week and see what it's all about. You need a renewal time, and honestly, you just need to go because you're excited and you would love to do this. Go. And so I get there, and the day before I arrive, she had received a phone call from another leader within our denomination. He's a retired district superintendent. He kind of sort of like in the role of supervisory over pastors in the United Methodist Connection. And he had called her and said, "Hey, I've been working on building this project for about a year and a half now. Something that we in the South Central European Conference have sort of prioritized. There's a historic French-speaking congregation in Geneva, Switzerland. It's coming to its natural completion as a group, and we've decided we want to build and found a peace project in Geneva. And we've been looking at how do we have a team that has sort of an international essence about them. And so we have clergy people from Africa and Europe, and we have lay people from South America and Europe. And what we don't have is what we really wanted was somebody who's first an English speaker, naturally, and perhaps somebody from a Western perspective. Do you happen to know any of your American colleagues who would be interested in this kind of project? We're looking for someone who can do leadership, and someone, it would be really helpful if they had background in fundraising. And she said, well, actually, my friend is landing tomorrow and he fits those profiles exactly. Can I talk to him? And maybe while he's here, we can connect. So that is the very abbreviated version of how this all started to come together. Was just a happenstance that he made a phone call the day before I landed, asking for an American pastor with a bent towards peace work. And bonus if they have background fundraising. By the way, I did a little over a decade of professional fundraising before I came into ministry. So, like I say, literally building my profile out loud and then saying, "Do you know anybody?" And it was kind of me. So, the process has taken over a year to really get everything to come together. In part because Swiss visas are hard to come by. Um, well, Swiss visas are hard to come by for Americans.
Right. Right.
Believe it or not, we're not exactly a favored nation to some countries right now. I don't know if there's a reason for that,
Right.
but here we are. So we realized that for us to get a visa to be able to go, we would probably have to be sent under what's called under secondment, which means that there's a second entity that is essentially sponsoring and paying for, et cetera, but they don't have a presence in the country physically. So that's what we're doing. And so we spent the first 6 months negotiating with the arm of the Methodist Church called General Board of Global Missions, Ministries, sorry, and inviting them to consider taking this placement site on as a missionary placement.
Mm.
And once they said yes to that, and all the negotiations happened between, all the appropriate people, then it was like, okay, Charles, now it's time to actually apply to be a missionary. So then I had to put in my application, and I had to go through multiple rounds of interviews and background checks, et cetera, et cetera. And then here we are, this past January. I get the phone call, well, actually an email, I guess I should say. I get the email saying, "Hey, we've received you," and said yes, we affirm what you sent is your call to this location, and we want to bring you on as a missionary in the United Methodist Church, and we want to send you to Geneva to lead the project that's called Hearts at Peace. It's an international Methodist connection. And so that's how we got from all the way back there to all the way here now.
Charles, I love that, for a lot of reasons. One, we ask the question at the end of the podcast every week, just when it's Matt and I, where have you seen God at work lately? Take your renewal leave. Right? Let's ask the question. It's like, let's actually take our leave and get some rest and see what happens, right?
And by the way, side part B to that, listen to your spouse.
Yes, 100%.
That should
Without
be
a doubt.
first. That should be first, then renewal. Like that.
Yes.
Like let's be real about that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. There's so much about your story that that I love and resonates and rhymes with mine. I worked in the church forever, but had a real job and worked at the church part-time, kind of like you talked about. And when I went full-time in the church, was going to be just a youth pastor, right? I hate the just part, but I was going to be just a youth pastor because that's all anybody ever told me I could do. And at 38, I got ordained. So yeah, I understand. Also a late bloomer.
Well, and how Charles and I became connected actually has a lot to do with part of my story. Is that the church that Charles is currently pastoring in before he takes off for Switzerland is I call it my family church. That was the church that we would go for funerals and stuff in Kansas and in Winfield, Kansas, right across the street from beautiful Southwestern University. And that had always played a part in my early life. And I never realized it was a United Methodist church until I don't remember when, but it was when I was going through the process of ordination, and I learned that that was a part of who we were. We were United Methodist before I even realized it. What a United Methodist thing to say, really. but that church, that church is so beautiful, Zach. I can't like. Someday I want to be able to preach in that church. I've yet to preach there, but it is so beautiful. Last year we went on our mission trip, and I reached out to the church to say, hey, could we stay there for our mission trip? And so then when I met Charles, I hadn't ever really, we did the thing that you and I did when we first started the podcast. Like, we literally just chatted back and forth through text and all that stuff. And then the day that we arrived at the church, on like, it was, everybody was like, oh my gosh, it's other Matt, or like it's Matt's doppelganger, or like there were a lot of comments made. And then we get to Sunday morning, and he's wearing his alb with his you had Vans on, right? Not Chuck Taylor. Yeah. And like, literally, like, everybody's like, come on, like,
nice.
Yeah,
very
like,
nice.
Like, it was, yeah. And so there were a lot of comments. I was like, oh, this dude's cool. And so we've kind of found ways to stay in touch. And then when I saw this, I was like, oh man, we got to have him on the show, because this is a really cool opportunity. I actually think you're the first missionary we've had on the show, actually.
I believe that's right.
And we definitely want to support our United Methodist missionaries, because they're doing amazing work all over the world. And I just wanted to hear your story. I wanted to hear what you're doing, and like, what are some ways that we can support you in this journey?
Yeah. So thank you for all of that acknowledgement. I will say the same thing. Like, my congregation, especially our youth group, and well, in fact, my kids, they're like, see, he absolutely proves that United Methodist pastor is an archetype. Like, there is a type. It's like gray bearded, like, cool dude, laid back, chill. Like, this is the archetype of the United Methodist pastor, for at least for my kids, and for the youth in our church. Like, they have this archetype in their mind, even though my two predecessors in this pulpit were both women. So I say that all tongue in cheek and jesting. Especially appropriate to mention this week, as we just celebrated the 70th anniversary of women's ordination in the Methodist Connection. I don't know about you guys. I always feel a little bit troubled by shouting that statistic, just for the sake of the fact that we know that there were many Methodist women who were preaching and teaching all the way back to the beginning of our connection. And so I always have to caveat that wonderful celebration that, yes, we officially did it like 70 years ago, but like, let's name that was part of our history too. And women have always had a legitimate place in the pulpit, in my mind. And even our connection was practicing that long before we made that historic decision. So anyway, not to get down a rabbit hole there, but it's a good week to be reminded of our sisters who are preaching and teaching and doing the amazing ministry work too. So, so the project itself, I think, could best be described as, we are concerned with creating we're sort of curating a group of peacemakers. That's the hope. So often we think about church planting as the work of what missionaries do, and I want to talk a little bit more about, especially since I'm your first missionary, about decolonization of mission work over the last 60 years in the church broadly, but also especially within the United Methodist Connection, because I think it's something that many people are only loosely aware of, if they're aware of it at all. And it's also some of the bias that I carried before I, started exploring my own call as a missionary. But yeah, the project is, we're creating a church. Maybe we'd call it an ecclesia. We're creating a group, a gathering of people of faith, for the purpose of learning peace internally, so that we can then move peace out into the world around us. Now, Geneva, Switzerland was selected for good reason as the focal point for this. I mean, the United Nations have their headquarters there. You've got the World Council of Churches have a headquarters there. World Methodist Council has a large office there. A lot of NGOs, nonprofits, like they all go to Geneva because it's sort of the default center of world peace, right? Like the Geneva Convention, like
Mhm.
that's when we think about how do we foster peace amongst nations. Where do we think about? We think about Geneva, Switzerland. I mean, we used to think about Washington, D.C. a lot more in that way, but now I think we think a little bit less in those ways and a little bit more specifically about Geneva. So if you're going to center a peace project somewhere in Europe, Geneva's probably the place to do it. So we are moving with the understanding of if this group of people comes together and decides that we want to worship on Sunday morning, awesome. We will do that. And we will find space and place and we will do it in an authentic way and we will be Methodists in that moment too. Um, but John Wesley, John and Charles, in the early days of the heyday of the Methodist movement, John sort of had this attitude around Sunday morning, like Sunday's going to take care of itself, right? Like there's a church on every corner. You're going to find a place to worship. Like he basically believing that we're all kind of Anglican by default based on his location, et cetera, et cetera. There's an Anglican church everywhere. Like you have a church to go to on Sunday morning. What I care about is what you do Monday through Saturday. How are you being in small connected groups with people who are holding you accountable for your learning and growth, who you are helping hold accountable for learning and growth? And how are you going out and doing these acts of piety, how are you serving the world around you? How are you changing the world around you? Because that's the social gospel that Wesleyans have always held dearly to, right? So we are trying to take the same attitude. Like we believe that if Sunday has a need for us to gather as a community, like we're going to do that and we're ready and like we're pastor stacked in this team, right? We can do that work. But we're way more focused on those other 6 days. So, how do we gather people that care about peacemaking in the world? How do we teach them how to be peaceful people within themselves so that they can help teach others? How do we gather those people together around projects that they care about, creating dialogue between faith communities and nonprofits? And like, how do we do this work collectively together mentally? Um, like that is our focus. So yeah, there may come a day where we have a regular Sunday morning worship. That's probably at least 6 months down the road after we all get there. Um, but it may not, and that's okay in our purview. The point is not to create another church on another corner. The point is to create a sacred community of people who actually believe that following the way of Jesus can lead to peace both internally and externally, and that they want to share that around the world. So that's the project.
Love that. You answered my biggest question in the idea of creating a peace focused thing. Why Switzerland? Is there something going on there that I'm not aware of? But you're right. That in my ignorant understanding of the world, that's what I think of when I think of peace and the center of that. It's always Switzerland, right? They're
Right,
always neutral, right?
right.
Always there. And yeah, what a better place, especially with the folks and the organizations and the people doing the work around the world already centered there. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that.
Yes.
Can
So,
oh, go ahead.
it is. I want to come back to a little bit about the missionary work itself too, because I
Please, yeah.
think that's a really that's an area where I've grown a lot this year in my understanding, and now I want to help sort of shout that to the rooftops. So, in the mid '60s, there we kind of went under a time of revolutionary change of idea about ministry work, missionary work. I'm sorry. Um, Missionary work prior to that time was really focused on mission two. And this is about the simplest way I can describe the shift is Mission 2 is a dead or dying way of doing mission for many people. Mission with is now the word of the day. And we've been working on making that sea change for the last 50 years. Um, a bigger description of Mission 2 is what I grew up remembering mission trips as were the we're going to go to some poor place that doesn't know Jesus and we're going to drop him off on the curb and make sure that they know Jesus, right? Um, very imperialized, very colonistic mindset of we know how to worship Jesus and we're going to take those tools to a community who just doesn't know Jesus and we're going to introduce them and show them how to be a parentheses white church. Um, so that was mission work for a lot of years, and that was even the mission trips that my church community partook in when I was growing up. That's the attitude I saw. And so I never thought that I would ever, I mean, as much as I never thought of myself being a pastor, I never thought of myself being a missionary because I just had such complicated feelings. Like, part of me, even as a young person, was like, but I also learn about the beauty of the cultures of these places and these people and how wonderful they are. And by the way, in Sunday school, you just finished the lesson on how we're all God's children all around the world. Like we're all beautiful creations of God. Like somehow, somewhere in all of this, I can feel a tension that even at that young age, I could sense, but I didn't understand. And as I grew, it just felt like so much of it was wrapped up in colonization. And so in the last 50 years, we have said, how do we, instead of taking Jesus and dropping him off at the curb for people and expecting them to be the body of Christ as a reflection of how we are the body of Christ, it is how do we train missionaries to learn that their job is not to take their own stuff and insert it into a location, but instead to go and fold themselves into that location so that they can work alongside the people doing God's mission. Missio Dei would be the term that we use. How do we help missionaries understand that God's mission, God's work was already happening in a location before they ever got there? That they get to go and participate in God's work for the time that they're there, and God will be at work in that place with those people long after they're ever gone. So that's a big change in thought pattern, right? That's a big change in how do we, if you're familiar with the terminology of like asset-based community development, ABCD, they often talk about looking in your own garden for what you need before you go to the store. This is the sea change in missionary work that has been happening in this time. It's saying these communities, these places that we want to do mission work in, that we feel God is calling us to be in missionarily, they already have their own gardens. They're already participating in some form or fashion in God's mission, in the work that God is doing in their place. How do we go in and help reveal that, help be part of that, but not feel like we are coming in with all of the answers, and if you can just do things our way, you're going to be fine. So it is a sea change, and that means that we're still working on it. We're not perfected in it. I mean, we're 2,000 years of the church. We're still not perfected in how we do church either. So, we're a long haul project that God has, and missionary work is no different. So I am proud now to think of myself as a missionary. That was I guess you would say, an ontological shift that I had in the two. I went recently for training and commissioning, and I spent 2 weeks in Nairobi, Kenya for that. And I went out of a practical need because it was a requirement for my missionary service. And I came home, and sometime after my return realized that something had changed inside of me, and that instead of thinking of the missionary placement as a means to an end, that I in fact now fully identify as a missionary in the United Methodist connection. And I love that identity and I claim it. And that was not something that I had intended to want. And yet, as with so many things in this story, God has moved things around, both externally and inside of me, that have truly changed me, and I think are shaping me for the work that we're preparing to go do. On that note of missionary identity, I would mention that the pendant I'm wearing this morning was gifted to each of us as the missionary class. This is what's presented to all missionaries before they go into service. It's called the Anchor Cross, and since the I think early or mid '80s, I believe the Anchor Cross has been the symbol of United Methodist missionaries, reminding us that we are anchored in Christ, no matter where we are in the world. And yeah, again, I before I went to Kenya, before I went to commissioning and training, I did not expect to sit and say, "Hey, yeah, I really identify as a missionary." And yet here I am, and I definitely do, and I'm excited to take on that identity, and go to a place that God is already working, that people are already there who know and love God, and our job is to help spread that around, for as long as we're called to be there.
I was really hoping you were going to say, on my plane ride back, I was reading Luther's preface to Romans and I felt my heart strangely warmed. Like I was really hoping that's what you would have said. just the if you're going to be Wesley, just go ahead and go all out. Just be like,
Why
I was
not? Why not? I need to figure out what his horses were named so I can start, naming my vehicles after them. Right? Just
Yes. One of the things, I actually am now sitting on the advisory committee on ecumenical and interreligious relationships. And I'm hoping that in some way, shape, or form, we'll be able to connect with you in the work that you're doing there. Like, I don't know. Like, I just went to my first meeting last week, so I still don't know why I'm there or what I'm doing. However, I definitely think it'd be something to hear from you in that group, of some things are going on, because we've heard a lot about what's happening in Rome. We have an amazing person who's in Rome right now who's also bearded and semi-bald as well.
Matthew
And
Lafferty.
yes,
He was part of my commissioning class in Nairobi.
okay.
So Matthew and I spent 2 weeks together just recently.
And we met him at, was it World Methodist or Global Young People's? Do you remember, Zach?
Last name, remind me.
Lafferty.
Probably World Methodist.
So we've met him before. Like,
Yeah.
I can't remember. It was either at Global Young People's Convocation, when we almost died in the Philippines,
Yeah.
or at World Methodist when we had earthquake and hurricane come through. So
Could
we're
we
not
not die on a trip together? That would be great.
Can we not travel to a world connectional event where we have to deal with some kind of natural disaster? That would be nice. But I definitely think that would be a really cool way, just to be, like you said, I have no pull or say in that thing. There's way more bishops and way more people with knowledge in there than I am. I just got asked to be on it through the jurisdiction, and I'm sitting there smiling like, yeah, this is cool. Like, I'll be glad to talk about this. And I'm definitely grateful for the work that you're getting to do there. Like, I think it's a really cool deal. And I loved how you talked about missions. Like, I think that's something I've been also trying to figure out. How do we have that conversation about shift? It's more about the relationship building and recognizing that God was already there before we got there. It's just about building those relationships. Like with us on our trip, even on our way, like our whole trip kind of fell apart, but it was about the relationships that we built, not only through like your church and then the other places that we were on along the way. Like, we were just kind of there. Hey, we're here, we're happy to serve, whatever you need from us. Like, we don't know what we're doing, we don't know where we're going, and literally was changing on the fly the whole trip. But I have found those to be way more healthier and helpful and memorable than us saying, hey, we're going to go and work at XYZ place, do XYZ projects, and then call it a day. And I definitely love the approach of building those relationships and recognizing that God was already there before we got there and will be there long after we leave as well. But it's those relationships that we build that can hold true to that kingdom building that we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's and this is, as I say, this is not a revolutionary idea by any means. This isn't like brand new. This is work that's missiology has been going on since the mid '60s, when we really sort of had the aha moment. I mean, the peak of the sort of peak of Western missionary work came in the 19 teens, and some even point to a global gathering of missionaries that happened, I think, in 1912, maybe, in Europe, where there were, literally thousands of missionaries at this conference. It was sort of the height of, what was the missionary movement. And in the years since, we have sort of deconstructed our understanding of what that looks like, and then start to rebuild what does better missionary work look like on behalf of God's church. And I think we are, I don't think we're there yet. And that's and I need to acknowledge too, not every missionary group takes this type of mission theory, right? There are still the drop Jesus off at the curb missionary ideals happening in churches all over the world. So this is not to say, hey, yeah, we've really gotten close to getting this right, friends. No, this is to say, like, in this segment of the church, we've been working really, really hard to change how we do this, because we understand the harm that could get wrapped up in the way we were doing it, and the harm that did happen in many places in the way we were doing it. I mean, man, we only have to look at this country. And Matt, I know you and I both share special connections to Native peoples in our past and in our history and in our families. And the way that the First Nations people were treated here by people who felt like they were spreading the gospel of Jesus included my family being whitewashed and Christianized, and I not having any family stories from my Cherokee mother's side. When I believe it was my third great grandfather on her side was Quanah Parker, who was chief of Cherokee directly after the Trail of Tears. Despite me being a direct descendant of his, I have no old stories and no traditional anythings in my family history, because his family was well, my family was whitewashed, and we were taught to not be native. We were taught that to be native was to be sinful and against God's will, and that we needed to be like the people who were colonizing us, and they were doing it in great part in the name of Christianity. So yeah, we can see and acknowledge the harm that has come from the old missionary attitudes. Um, and it's complicated, because missionary work feels very much like evangelism. And if missionary work can easily dip its toe across the line into harm, does that mean evangelism carries the same thing? And TLDR, I think the answer is yes. But also, it's not just a simple yes or no answer either. I think that there is context matters so much when we're answering those questions. So it's not to say that being evangelistic is inherently bad. It's not to say that being missionarily focused is necessarily bad. Doing mission work, going on mission trips, going as a missionary, like, none of those things inherently are bad. But we have to work really hard at understanding our context so that we can do it well. And well, the three general rules, like, first, let's do no harm. No matter where we go and what we do, let's make sure that we are not doing harm as our first and our primary goal. And then after that, then we can do all the good that we can do with the time that we have, and meaningfully staying in love with God by attending our hearts to that which God calls us to do. So yeah, I'll be really Wesleyan there for just a second, and say I think that's the spirit that I hope to carry as a missionary. And I hope that we see our connection continue to live into that identity in its missionary spaces to first do no harm.
You bring up such a good point in when we know better, we do better. Uh, in I don't know that I've ever thought, at least out loud, about missionary work and evangelism being um, coming alongside of each other and doing the harm together. Right? Like, I know internally they've been super intertwined, at least in my experience, and both of those words and actions in which they've been carried out over the years carry a lot of baggage with it, right? Like, Matt and I spend a lot of time on this podcast reclaiming evangelism and what that means. Yeah, putting it side by side with being a missionary work, yeah, it makes sense. Duh,
Yeah.
right? But in the same right, reclaiming it and in a way that is not colonizing people, in a way that's not whitewashing people, in a way that's not coming in and saying, we'll do it like this, rather coming alongside with community, whether it's in our church, Switzerland, whatever it is we're doing, whether it's missionary work, evangelism, just being in our community. How are we as pastors, as churches, as people coming alongside each other and living into that, doing no harm, doing good, staying in love with God? How are we coming alongside of one another and sharing the love and grace of Christ that's for all people? And I think when we uh, maybe even keep them tangled up, right? But when we drop the baggage of it, of here's what it used to be and here's what we're actually called to do, because now we know better and we're doing better. There's value here and there's hope here, rather than somebody needs to put on a bumper sticker somewhere. Let's not drop Jesus off at the curb. That's phenomenal imagery of what I didn't grow up in the church, and the first youth group mission trip I took was to Mexico, and that's literally what it was. And I think back about that all the time of like, we were in deep Mexico. We were right across the Texas border in a very Hispanic Catholic area. They knew who Jesus was. And they were doing it just fine. Yet we came in and we're like, do it like this. And they sang our songs and they did our things and they politely waved at us as our tail lights went back over the border, and did not give a damn. Uh, and I think about that often. And like, who were we to think that this was a thing? And that again, that's just entangled and holds a whole lot of here's how I try to lead my church now. Here's how I try to come alongside my people, and when we go out into the community, let's not drop Jesus at the curb and think anything's going to happen differently.
Right.
But rather, let's model, let's show, let's live community with one another,
Yeah.
and see what we can learn together, and learn from each other.
Yes.
And yeah, it's I don't know. It just makes me laugh sometimes
But
and
it's
cry.
the great compartmentalization of the church.
Sure.
We compartmentalize everything. So we
Hmm.
compartmentalize it as evangelism,
Hmm.
discipleship, and you could even just say not even really discipleship, Sunday school and Bible study,
Hmm.
and then missions. And they never worked together. They never had conversation together. They never did anything together. And so one of the things that I realized here in this appointment, and it's actually something I've been thinking about for years, I just never had a place to be able to experiment with it, was we actually merged two of those venues and we call it the home team.
Hmm.
It's hospitality, outreach, missions, and everything else.
Right.
And that group literally handles the mission, like the mission stuff that we do. It also handles the outreach stuff that we do. It also handles our hospitality, but they all work together because that's actually that's what all that is. I think it's grounded in the idea of mission, of what we do. But I also think that like there is that connection. And it's like, I think that instead of compartmentalizing those spaces, which I think that's where the harm has been done. And I think that we need to get better at let's decompartmentalize the church and actually make it where we have teams that are understanding that when you're doing your discipleship stuff, that there is evangelism to it, that there is outreach to it, that there is hospitality in that space, like, and begin to understand that as the of what you do, you begin to start to see how well we can share Christ and Christ's love in a way without having to drop somebody off at the corner. Although there might be a few people I'd be willing to drop off at the corner for other reasons. But like, I think that when we truly start to see that as part of as an integral part of the life of the church, we can begin to understand, one, the harm that we've caused, to the work that still needs to be done, and three, like, it's okay to talk about the work that you're doing. I think sometimes we are like, oh no, we can't. We're not going to talk about our mission work. We're not going to talk about our outreach because we don't want to seem too prideful. I think there's a fine line between being too prideful and saying, no, here's who we are, here's what we do, because people are looking for those communities that are doing those things. And I think sometimes the church hides itself too well because they don't want to be evangelistic. And it's like, no, like that's part of the deal. Like, I don't know how you separate that. And that's just me. And I get that. Like, I truly understand that there are people who don't think that that's the thing, but like, it's a part of who we are. Like, we have to own it. And I think, but in order to own it, we also have to understand that there has been that harm that has been caused.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and Matt, and I think Zach, to your point as well, for those who sort of bristle at the idea of being evangelistic in any form or fashion, I think sometimes we forget to remind people that that work is big and small. There are large things that we do, there are very public things that we do, but there's also things that we do in public that seem very small that actually have measurable differences. One example, the language that we choose to use, right? We all know, I mean, I think especially as people in ministry, the power of words. We all understand that the words that we choose to use have an effect on how we think about things, how we process the world around us, and just being good stewards of the language that we use around people and topics, etc., can actually be an act of faith, can be part of our witness in the day-to-day lives that we lead. So I think for folks who are scared of it, even reminding them that you are by nature a body that influences the people around you, and how you choose to live is an act of your evangelism, whether you want it to be or not. So a friend of mine recently posted a very interesting, I think it was a clip off of YouTube, where people were talking about the use of the word expatriate or expat versus immigrant, and how just that language itself has a complicated relationship. So if you're, let's just use my example. If I, as an American, was to move to Mexico City or somewhere, Brazil or Africa, or I would be called an expat. Now, if a person from Mexico City moves to, let's say, America or somewhere in Europe or etc., what are they called? They're called an immigrant. Now, those are the same two people under the same, we can presume, the same set of circumstances has moved them from one nation to another. So what does that tell us? Well, there is an underlying level of racism or xenophobia or et cetera, that can be, we can interpret it a million ways, but somehow there is a difference in that language that is distinct enough that the person who is regularly called an expat might bristle at being called an immigrant, right? And someone who's called an immigrant might feel that that language or that designation has has an effect on how people see them. And so this language has been something that I've just recently started thinking about and wrestling with, because that's going to be a question of how do I refer to myself when I'm in a place where I am not from there? Do I allow people to call me an expat? Do I call myself that? Do I probably not is the answer, because I don't really I don't identify with that language for a number of reasons. Do I call myself an immigrant? Do I just use the privilege of my title and say I'm a missionary and try to skip the conversation altogether? Is that better? Arguably, in a place like Geneva, Switzerland, where the continent is post-Christian by at least 20 years ahead of us here in the West, that may not carry the privilege that I think it does. Like, I don't know. Um, but I think we can be evangelical in the way we live our lives in the small moments as well as the big, and it can make a difference in the world around us. And then that is living lives of consequence faithfully is then an act of evangelism to the people around us, because they know that there is something different about you. And yeah, I don't want to diminish or take away, like, we need to do the bigger acts. And Matt, you're spot on. This is not in any way a pullback from what you said, because we do need to do a better job as the church of saying this is who we are and this is what we are doing in the world. And we're doing it not out of pride, but we're doing it because it's the right thing to do as we see it through the lens of our faith, and we are moved by that to care for people. So yeah, rabbit hole. I didn't mean to go all the way down there, but interesting side topic of something that I myself have been wrestling with as of late.
Yeah. No, I think you're spot on, and in naming that and naming the complexities of it, and like you said, the privilege of it, right? Like, how do I navigate this in a world that doesn't always get that? Um, I'm going to shift gears on you a little bit, Charles, and my family moved 7 times in 12 years, as an itinerant pastor, and nothing as far as Switzerland, although we did crisscross the country and move from about 40 miles from the Mexico border to about 90 miles from the Canadian border about 10 years ago. So we know big moves. And I know what that's like, for a family to do and to embrace and to lean into. Um, Tell us a little bit. You said you listened to your spouse. She said go, and y'all are going. How's that transition for your family going?
So one of the advantages that I've had of being a late bloomer is that my kids were old enough when I went into ministry to have an understanding of what that meant.
Hmm.
And so when I said yes to this call, it was after getting the blessing and the support of my family.
Hmm.
Many pastors' kids, PKs, as we lovingly call them, are born into a family where that is their reality. They didn't have any agency in it. They didn't have any decision. They didn't have any voice. They didn't have any vote. It's just who they are. And here we go, kids, we're moving again. Um, and that's not the case for my kids. So we have always held it is an important part of our family structure that when big decisions get made that affect all of us, that we all have at least some voice, that we all discern together, that we all consider it together. Um, and my family is 100% on board.
Hmm.
And in fact, um, the continuation of the pursuit of all of this came because my wife was like, "You're doing this. Like, this is what you're gonna do."
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
like, there is no unclarity in this situation. It was
Hmm.
my spouse's idea, and well, not idea, but it was at her urging, and every step of the way, she urged me at the exact right places. And it was, and she told me, she's like, God is telling me that this is how I need to push you.
Hmm.
And she doesn't use that language. I mean, that's not something I hear from her every day. That's not something I hear from her once a quarter. That's not something I hear from her once a year. That is something that in our 22 years of marriage, she has said a few select times. And every time I listen to her, things work out for the better.
Hmm.
So when she says, God is telling me that I need to push you to make this phone call and do this thing, like, okay, all right, all right. As reluctant as I may have felt in several moments, like eventually I did, and it was absolutely the right move. So,
Hmm.
my family is in a similar place. Like they are very supportive, excited for the new adventures. Like there's
Yeah.
so many things that we are excited to learn and explore and do. Um, one of our favorite games right now is somebody will blurt out a place somewhere in Europe that we think would be cool to visit, and then we Google real quick to see how long it takes us to get there by bus and train, because
Hmm.
like public transportation there is everything. My favorite one recently was somebody said, "What about the Louvre in Paris? Just 4 hours by train." Um, just the kind of trip you can make on a Saturday morning, go spend
Right.
the afternoon in Paris, see the Louvre, have dinner, and then, take a gentle train ride home. Like, what a Saturday afternoon, right? Like,
Yep.
and also the culture and our friends there, who will be our partners in this ministry, um, like in some of our conversations this year, like as things became official and we know this is all coming together, like their first questions were like, where are you going to go on your first vacation?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Like, where's your first holiday to? Like,
Hmm.
not where's your holiday going to be to while you're here? No, where's your first
Where's
holiday
the
going to
first time?
be? Because that's culturally who most of Europe is. Like,
Hmm.
if you're a part-time employee at the local grocery store down the block in Geneva, your minimum wage is somewhere akin to $27 US an hour. And you walk in the door with 5 weeks of paid leave.
Right.
And that's just standard.
Yeah.
Like anything, that's literally the federal minimum
Yeah.
for all people. If and then many employees get way more than that. Like it's traveling and existing and caring for yourself is part of their societal structure, that I think is really impressive. And it creates a society where people work in order to be able to live their lives, not just live lives to do the work.
Mhm.
And we look forward to acclimating to that sort of society. I come from, very intense and demanding background. I mean, pastoral ministry is an intense and demanding job.
Mhm.
I come from high levels fundraising, where my most recent role was in major gifts and seeking, large major gifts for an institution. Before that, I was doing like fundraising in mass, and I was accountable for a little over $2 million of fundraising a year. Like high
Mhm.
stakes. Before that, I was in retail management where 80, 90 hours a week was like very typical and very average and just absolutely expected. Like cultures of grind.
Mhm.
And walking into a place where that's just not expected, is exciting in a way. Um, but yeah, I think some of the hardest things for us in this move, like we're getting rid of like 90 to 95% of what we own.
Right.
I'm sitting here feeling a little bit ashamed this morning because, as you can see, my shelves are like bare behind me. That's because they're already packed and in boxes. Normally, I look more like your shelves behind the two of you with books and whatnot everywhere because I love that. Our books and our art are the two things that we're like, yeah, we're taking all of that.
Mhm.
Everything else, it's like, donate it, sell it, pitch it. If it doesn't
Mhm.
have any value to anyone anymore, like 95% of what we own is going away,
Mhm.
just for practical reasons. Um, and so we're kind of starting over. We've been leading on a lot the gospel story where Jesus sends the 70 or the 72, right, depending on which version you read. And go, don't take an extra cloak, don't take an extra pair of sandals, just go with what you got and trust that you're going to be provided for when you get there. We're kind of living that in a very direct
Yeah.
way right now. And also, there's part of me that says like every one of us, especially in the global North and West, should have to like get rid of 90% of what we own every 5 years.
Mhm.
Like, would we not be healthier if we just literally had to get rid of so many things because we accumulate so much stuff that really doesn't carry meaning, that doesn't carry value, that simply binds us in ways that we don't know until we've freed ourselves from it. Um, so yeah, it's a bit freeing to be doing this process. It is very cathartic, and also it's very scary,
Mhm.
um, and and I think we're ready. When I remember when I first sat down with my DS here a year ago to say, "Hey, we're exploring this opportunity." He gave me a compliment that I didn't expect. Um, well, he said a couple of things, but the one that I'll share here is, Charles, if I was called and said, "Who would you recommend for this position?" He said, "Your name is one of maybe two or three in our entire conference that I would have put forward." First, it's who I know you to be as a pastor. It's who I know you to be in your ministry. But second, and not less important, your family can do this work. Your family is the kind that will be able to go to another country and assimilate and be folded into the culture and be sensitive to people's needs around them. Your family is the profile of a family who I believe can do this well. And full disclosure, my DS originally comes from Africa, did ministry and education in Europe as well as here, and has completed his doctorate here in the United States. Like, he understands what it means to be in mission and in ministry in a cross-cultural context. Like, he gets it in ways that I don't. So that was a huge compliment from him, not just for me, but for my family being prepared and capable to do this work.
Well, Charles, definitely thank you for your time. We want to honor your time. We could talk for days, and I think our listeners would be bored.
We would have a good time.
We would have a good time, and it would be fun editing, the 90 segments with Charles, and just have that be a whole series. But we definitely want to honor your time.
I appreciate that. Can I make a shameless plug before we
Yeah,
Please.
please do.
Okay. So we will be, once we get to Switzerland, we will be starting a blog. And so stay tuned, and we will share that back once we get that launched. We want people to be able to follow along the journey. Obviously, the project hasn't launched all of its socials yet. So as that comes out, we'll be sharing that in that space. Right now, if people are interested in helping and assisting the work that we do as a United Methodist missionary, I have what's called an advance number, which is just a fancy way of saying I have a fundraising number. And the fundraising we do as missionaries actually goes into a pool for all missionaries, because we know that some people are going to have more access to, I mean, if you're a missionary coming from, let's say, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the home churches that you know and have connection to are going to have a different level of being able to support you than I will here in the United States. So we pool our fundraising together for all missionaries. So if you'd like to support my advance number is 302-2909, and you can search, if you just search my name, Charles McKinzie, and GBGM, you're going to be directed to my site, which is actually got my whole profile on there and more details about the placement in Switzerland. But it's a great place to go, and you can make if you'd like to support with a financial gift, that's a great place to go and help support not just me, but all those who are in missionary work in the United Methodist Church right now.
Thank you for making that plug. That's vastly important, exactly what we want to do. And as you get the blog going and all the social medias up, share them with us. We'll get it out to our 3 listeners. It'll be great.
Well, I want to say thank you for the work that you do to allow people to have a space to wrestle with narratives that maybe we don't always wrestle with, and we should. Thank you for giving me a platform to come on and talk about something that I'm passionate about. And that I feel God is calling us into in this season of our lives. Thank you for the work you do. Thank you for making me a welcome guest this morning.
Of course. Thank you. And when you're a year in or have some things on the ground, we'll get an update from you and have you back on. And yeah, because this work is important. And like you said, having that narrative approach of getting to hear people's stories, and gosh, I wasn't called to this, but here we are, right? Here's how God works and changes and grows within us, and you never know. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful story.
Thank you.
Listeners, we will have the links in the show notes. That way you can click on that and find ways to support Charles and our other United Methodist missionaries that are literally all over the world. We definitely hope that that's something you prayerfully consider, or maybe even getting a group together and figuring out ways that you can support that. I know maybe even writing letters or other things like that are also very supportive ways of just giving that encouragement along the way. And so you can find all of our stuff at beardedtheologians.com, where we've got, almost 10 years worth of content, all sorts of fun things. You can even buy a shirt. Charles will try to figure out how to send you a shirt to Switzerland, so that way you don't have to pay, to have it shipped. But definitely
Got
love
room for one more t-shirt, I promise.
We'll find a way to get that to you. But definitely, thank you, Charles, for being here today, and thank you, listeners, for listening. And so, for the Bearded Theologians, I'm Matt Franks.
I'm Zach Bechtold. Thanks for checking us out.
And like this video, and push that thumbs up.
Thank you for listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share on all social media outlets. You can check out old episodes and more information at beardedtheologians.com. Thanks for checking us out.